The face on my security monitor was a ghost from a life I had buried long ago. Sarah sat in the waiting area of my corporate headquarters, fidgeting with the strap of a worn-out handbag. 10 years had passed, but time had not been kind. The arrogant confidence she once wore like expensive perfume had evaporated, replaced by a cheap scent of desperation. She looked smaller, worn down by the world that she had chosen over me. My assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, calm and professional. "Sir, the 3 p.m. applicant for the junior administrative role is here. Her name is Sarah Jensen." I leaned back in my leather chair, the one that cost more than the car I used to drive when she knew me, and I felt a cold, satisfying calm settle over me. The view from my corner office on the 50th floor spanned the entire city, a city that had once made me feel insignificant. She had no idea that the job application she so desperately needed me to approve was for a position cleaning up the messes of the very company she told me I was too stupid to ever build. She thought she was applying for a fresh start, a lifeline to pull her out of the gutter. She didn't know she was walking into a reckoning, a final chapter to a story she thought she had finished writing a decade ago when she threw my engagement ring back in my face and walked out of my life. She was a loose end I hadn't realized I needed to tie up. Now she was here, voluntarily walking into the heart of my world, the empire I had built not despite her, but because of her. My world, my rules. You're probably wondering why I would even let her set foot in this building, let alone grant her an interview. Why dredge up all that pain and betrayal? To understand why, you have to go back to the beginning, back to a cold, rainy night when she shattered my heart and told me a man's worth was measured only by the size of his bank account. It began, as these things often do, with love, or what I thought was love. 12 years ago, Sarah and I were everything to each other. We lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment with peeling paint and a radiator that hissed like a cornered snake. But it was ours. I was juggling my final year of a computer science degree with a part-time job fixing computers at a local repair shop. Every dollar I made was split 3 ways: rent, cheap noodles, and savings. The savings jar was my sacred object. It was labelled Future, and inside was the seed money for the software company I dreamed of building. I would talk about it for hours, sketching out ideas on napkins, explaining algorithms and business models to Sarah, whose eyes would glaze over, but she'd smile and say, "That's nice, honey." Back then, that was enough. Her belief in me, or at least my perception of it, was the fuel I ran on. She was beautiful and vibrant, and when she looked at me, I felt like the richest man in the world. The problem was, my world wasn't the one she really wanted to live in. The first signs of the rot came from my own family. Sunday dinners at my parents' house were a weekly ritual of quiet humiliation. My older brother Mark was the golden child. He was a sales manager at a luxury car dealership, always dressed in a sharp suit, flashing a new watch, and telling stories about his high-rolling clients. My parents would hang on his every word. "David, you're so quiet," my mother would say, her voice laced with pity. "Why don't you tell us what you're up to, still fiddling with those computers in that dusty little shop?" My father would just grunt in agreement. "Your brother just closed a deal on a new convertible. That's real work, a man's work." I would try to explain my project, my vision for a streamlined logistics software that could revolutionize the shipping industry, but their eyes would drift back to Mark. He was tangible success. I was just a boy with a dream, and in their eyes, dreams didn't pay the bills. I noticed Sarah started getting quieter on the car rides home from those dinners. The smile she gave me started to look a little more strained, a little less genuine. The poison was seeping in. The quiet car rides turned into arguments. The strained smiles became outright sighs of frustration. Sarah started spending more time with my family, but without me. She'd go shopping with my mother or have drinks with Mark and his friends. When she came home, she smelled of expensive perfume and discontent. "Mark introduced me to the most amazing man today," she said one evening, barely looking up from her phone. "His name is Richard. He owns an import-export business. He just bought a yacht." She said it casually, but the words were daggers. "Mark says Richard is looking for a new personal assistant. It pays more than my entire salary." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Your brother introduced you to him?" I asked. "Of course," she scoffed. "Mark knows people. He understands ambition. He's trying to help me." I knew what Mark was doing. He wasn't helping her. He was poisoning her against me, dangling a world of superficial glitter in front of her to prove how little I had to offer. The final confrontation came a week later. I came home from the repair shop, grease under my fingernails, to find her packing a suitcase. The air was thick and cold. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She didn't look at me. She just kept folding clothes with cold precision. "I can't do this anymore, David," she said, her voice flat. "I can't live in this shoebox, waiting for a future that's never going to come. I want a life, a real one." She finally turned to face me, and her eyes were hard, devoid of any warmth they once held for me. "Richard asked me to move in with him, to his penthouse downtown." She saw the devastation on my face and sneered. "What did you expect? Did you think I was going to waste my youth watching you hoard pennies in a jar?" She pulled the simple silver ring I'd given her from her finger. It had taken me 3 months of saving to buy it. She didn't throw it. She did something worse. She placed it gently on top of the future jar on the kitchen counter, a final, cruel monument to my failure. "Goodbye, David." And with that, she walked out. When I called my parents, sobbing, looking for an ounce of comfort, my father's words were like stones. "Well, son, you can't blame the girl for wanting a better life. Maybe you should have been more like your brother." The silence in the apartment after that phone call was heavier than any sound I had ever heard. It was the silence of total abandonment. My girlfriend was gone, and my family had just confirmed what she had made me feel, that I was worthless. I stared at the silver ring sitting on my savings jar, a mocking little trophy of my failure. For a week, I barely moved. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just replayed every cruel word, every dismissive glance from Sarah, from my parents, from Mark. Their voices became a chorus in my head, chanting a symphony of my inadequacy. They had judged me, condemned me, and left me for dead. The grief was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest until I could barely breathe. Eventually, the eviction notice on my door forced me to move. I couldn't afford the rent on my own. I packed my life into 2 cardboard boxes, some clothes, my textbooks, and my old reliable laptop. I left the furniture, the dishes, everything that reminded me of her. The last thing I packed was the future jar. I took the ring off the lid and threw it in the trash. The money inside, a meager $2,300 I had scrimped and saved, felt like both a joke and the only real thing I had left in the world. I moved into a single room in a boarding house on the other side of town. The place smelled of boiled cabbage and damp. My window looked out onto a brick wall. This was it. This was rock bottom. For a month, I drowned in my own misery. Then, one night, staring at that brick wall, something inside me shifted. The grief, so heavy and suffocating, began to burn. It crystallized into a cold, hard diamond of rage. Not a hot, shouting rage, but a quiet, focused fury. They thought I was a failure. They thought I was nothing. I would show them. I would show them all. I wasn't going to do it for Sarah or to win her back. I was going to do it for me. I was going to build my empire not on a foundation of love, but on the ashes of their betrayal. I opened my laptop, the screen illuminating my grimy little room. I deleted every picture of her, blocked my family's numbers, and created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Vengeance. Inside, I opened the business plan for my logistics software. The work began. My life contracted to the 4 walls of that room and the glowing screen of my laptop. The folder named Vengeance became my entire world. I quit the repair shop and got a job as a night security guard, a mindless gig that let me sit in a quiet lobby for 8 hours, coding. I slept for 4 hours, coded for 12, and lived on instant noodles and the bitter coffee from the security office. Days and weeks blurred into one long, continuous grind. There were no weekends, no holidays, no friends. My only companion was the burning rage that had become my engine. It was a pure, clean, burning fuel. Every time my motivation wavered, I would conjure their faces: Sarah's sneer, Mark's condescending smirk, my mother's look of pity, and I would get back to work. After 6 months of this monastic existence, I had a working prototype. It was rough, but it was functional. I used the last $1,000 from the future jar to register the company. I called it Titan Solutions, a name that felt solid and unbreakable. I then found the 10 smallest local delivery and trucking companies I could and offered them my logistics software for free for 1 year. All I asked for in return was honest feedback. 9 of them ignored me. One, a small family-owned courier service on the verge of bankruptcy, said yes. They had nothing to lose. For the next year, they were my only client. I was their 24/7 tech support. I customized the software to their exact needs, answered every call on the first ring, and treated their $100-a-month business like it was a Fortune 500 company. Slowly, it worked. Their efficiency doubled. Their fuel costs dropped by 30%. The owner, a grizzled old man named George, started telling his friends in the industry about the quiet, intense young man who saved his business. After a year, George insisted on paying me a full enterprise rate. He became my first real reference. That one reference turned into 2 clients, 2 turned into 5. I hired my first employee, a brilliant coder who was even more socially awkward than I was. We rented a tiny, windowless office above a pizzeria. For the next 5 years, we just worked. Every cent of profit went back into the company. By the time I finally looked up from the screen, Titan Solutions was a multi-million-dollar company with 70 employees. I had a corner office with a view of the entire city. And no one from my past had any idea I even existed. Success grants you many things, but the most useful is information. Once Titan Solutions was big enough, I hired a private investigation firm for a simple task: to compile a comprehensive, ongoing report on 3 individuals: Sarah Jensen, Mark Thompson, and Richard Peterson. I didn't act on the information. I just read the reports that came to my desk every quarter. For years, they detailed a life of lavish parties, exotic travel, and gaudy displays of wealth. I would read them, feel that familiar cold burn in my gut, and get back to work. Then, about a year ago, the reports started to get interesting. Richard's empire, it turned out, was a house of cards built on fraudulent loans and shell corporations. When one of his investors got suspicious, the whole thing came crashing down in a spectacular public implosion. He was ruined. The fallout was immediate. Richard, facing lawsuits and bankruptcy, disappeared from the social scene, and Sarah, his glamorous accessory, was unceremoniously discarded. The penthouse was seized, the cars were repossessed, and her credit cards were declined. According to the report, she moved into a small rented room in a shared apartment. The irony was so thick I could taste it. She had traded my tiny apartment for a penthouse, and now life had returned her to a place even worse than where she'd started, only this time she was 10 years older, with no degree and a 10-year gap on her resume filled with socialite. The schadenfreude didn't stop there. My brother Mark's luck ran out too. His success had always been a performance, funded by commissions and leveraged by debt. A downturn in the economy hit the luxury car market hard. His income plummeted, but his spending didn't. Within 6 months, he was fired for falsifying sales reports to meet his quotas. His leased convertible was taken back, and he was facing his own mountain of debt. My parents, who I learned had given Mark a significant portion of their retirement savings to invest, were left high and dry. The golden child had tarnished, taking them down with him. I felt nothing watching their lives unravel. It was like watching a law of physics in action, an equal and opposite reaction. Then the calls started. A blocked number, day after day. A tentative email from my mother with the subject line, "Thinking of you." I deleted them all without a second thought. They were ghosts, and I had no time for ghosts. After weeks of ignoring their calls and emails, the universe delivered the opportunity for closure directly to my desk. My head of human resources, a sharp woman named Diana, walked into my office holding a single resume, a puzzled look on her face. "David, I have a strange one here. I was about to file it in the rejection pile, but the last name is Thompson, same as yours was before you changed it. I thought I should bring it to your attention on the off chance it was a relative you wanted to handle." I took the paper from her. It was Sarah. Her married name, Jensen, was listed, but she had included her maiden name, Thompson, underneath, likely hoping the family connection to a CEO she'd never met might give her an edge. The resume was pathetic. A decade-long gap filled with a vague entry, personal assistant to high net worth individual. Her skills section listed event planning and social coordination. It was a resume for a life that no longer existed. "Her qualifications are non-existent for any role we have," Diana said gently. "Even the junior admin position she applied for requires proficiency in software she's clearly never used." Her cover letter speaks of starting over and wanting a stable environment. A stable environment. The irony was a physical blow. She had traded my stability for glitter, and now that the glitter had washed away, she was crawling back, looking for a rock to hide under. A cold, perfect clarity settled over me. This was better than any plan I could have orchestrated. Her own desperation had led her to my door. "You're right, Diana," I said, my voice perfectly level. "She's not qualified." I handed the resume back to her. "Schedule an interview with her for Friday at 3 p.m. for the junior administrative role." Diana looked surprised. "But, sir, you just said—" "I know what I said," I interrupted, my tone leaving no room for argument. "Put her in conference room A. Tell her the final interview will be conducted personally by the CEO. Diana nodded, confused but obedient. "And, Diana," I added as she reached the door, "make sure the blinds are fully open." She left, and I turned my chair to face the window. Conference room A had the best view in the building. It was the panoramic vista I had described to Sarah all those years ago in our dingy apartment, the view I told her we would one day share. Now she would see it for the first time, not as my partner, but as a beggar at my gate. The circle was about to close. On Friday, at precisely 2:59 p.m., I left my office and walked down the silent, carpeted hallway to conference room A. I paused outside the glass door, watching her for a moment. She was staring out the floor-to-ceiling window at the city sprawled below, the exact view I had promised her. She looked lost in it, perhaps imagining a life she might have had or one she had lost. I pushed the door open. It made a soft hydraulic hiss. She turned, a nervous, practiced interview smile plastered on her face. The smile froze, then shattered. Her eyes widened in disbelief. The colour drained from her cheeks. She saw my face, my suit that cost more than her car, the palpable aura of success and power that now surrounded me. This wasn't the broken boy she had left in a shabby apartment. This was someone else entirely. "David," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Oh my God, is it really you?" 1,000 calculations flickered in her eyes, shock giving way to a desperate, grasping hope. She thought this was a miracle, a second chance delivered by fate. She thought our shared history was her winning lottery ticket. I gave her a polite, empty smile that didn't reach my eyes and gestured to the chair opposite me at the long, polished mahogany table. "Please have a seat, Miss Jensen," I said. My voice was calm, formal, and utterly detached. Using her married name was like a slap. Her face fell, but she quickly recovered and sat down, clutching her worn handbag in her lap. I sat opposite her, placing her resume on the table between us. I didn't look at it. I looked directly at her. "Thank you for coming in today," I began, my tone that of a CEO who was 5 minutes behind schedule. "As you know, you're here for the junior administrative position. Here at Titan Solutions, we place a great deal of importance on character. So, let's start there." I leaned forward slightly. "This role requires a high degree of loyalty and a long-term commitment to the company's vision. Can you speak to your history with long-term commitments?" Her mouth opened and closed silently. She stared at me, the blood returning to her face in a rush of panicked humiliation. She knew this wasn't an interview, it was a tribunal. I've always been very committed," she stammered, her voice thin. "Good," I said, my voice cutting through her lie. "Because we also value substance over style here. Tell me, Ms. Jensen, how would you define your core values in a professional setting?" Each question was a precision strike, aimed at the foundations of her betrayal. She began to tremble, her eyes welling up. "David, please," she whispered, the professional facade crumbling completely. "Please stop." "Stop," I echoed, my voice devoid of any pity. I leaned back in my chair, the mask of the professional CEO falling away, replaced by the face of the man she had destroyed. "Why would I stop now, Sarah? This is the first honest conversation we've had in over a decade." I let the silence hang in the air for a moment, letting her absorb the full weight of her helplessness. "I remember everything about the night you left," I continued, my voice low and steady. "I remember the rain on the window of our tiny apartment. I remember the look on your face when you told me you couldn't wait for a future in a jar. I remember you putting my ring on that jar, as if to mock the very idea of it. And I remember the phone call to my parents afterward, when they told me you were right to leave me. They all chose a man's wallet over his character. You, my brother, my parents, all of you." I watched her flinch as I recounted the betrayals. "For 10 years, I went on, I let that pain and anger build me. I built this. I gestured vaguely to the office, the city, the empire around us. And for 10 years I've watched you. I watched your rich man, Richard, turn out to be a common fraud. I watched his fantasy world collapse and take you with it. I watched my golden child brother get fired for being a cheat and a failure. I watched my parents lose everything they had betting on the wrong son. And all of you came crawling back to the man you threw away. Not because you were sorry, but because you were desperate." I stood up, my shadow falling over her. "Let me be perfectly clear. There is no job. There was never going to be a job. I didn't bring you here to rescue you. I brought you here to look you in the eye and tell you that you are seeing the consequences of your choices. You chose a life of shallow glitter, and it led you right back to where you started, with nothing. You wanted a man with a penthouse view? Well, here it is. This was the future you threw in the trash. Enjoy the sight." I pressed a button on the intercom on the desk. "Diana, could you please send security to escort Ms. Jensen out of the building?" Sarah stared at me, her face a mask of utter devastation, the final dawning horror that there would be no salvation here. She didn't even cry. She was empty. The security guards arrived, silent and efficient, and led her away. I watched her go, then turned to look out the window at my city. There was no joy, no triumphant rush. There was only a profound, quiet stillness. The ghost was gone. The debt was paid. I was finally free.